Hello. Okay, so now we have moved through quest one with Samantha, where we hopefully students have gathered high quality sources. They are thinking about how to use them to substantiate their ideas. They're evaluating them for misinformation, et cetera. And then Chelsea has moved us through quest two, where they're zooming out and they are hopefully they're past that first draft. They've made an outline and now they're ready to focus on a deeper level of refinement to express their ideas. So let's talk a little bit about more what that might mean as far as elevating your writing. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we are talking about elevating student writing, we mean elevating the quality of sentences, improving clunky flow between ideas, reducing unintentional bias and assumptions, developing writing voice. So all of those things contribute to developing a stronger writing voice. Next slide, please. So again, I'm going to play off this idea that we've tried to thread throughout, that students don't just come to the next level of their education with nothing in hand. They have some strengths that they can use to evolve into better writers. So at this point, moving from a 2-year college to 4 high school, or even from 4 to graduate school, students have experience with writing and editing tools such as Microsoft Word and Google Docs. They may not see it this way, but they have experience writing with other voices. They instinctively know that the way you text your friends is probably not the way you should text your boss, because it depends on context. They probably have experience with activities where they do peer review. Usually it's that rubric that they get, they trade papers, and they give feedback to other students. Or they do a similar something that's built into their syllabus where they are expected to bring in a first draft and then their instructor provides feedback and they fold that into subsequent drafts. Okay, next, please. So before I get into this tool, I wanted to those two activities that I talked about before, where they maybe um, look at each other's papers or they get feedback from their teacher, often those activities are editing that's folded into the syllabus. So those activities are not, the editing process is built into the syllabus. They're told like, okay, here's your first draft, here is when you're going to edit, and here is the final draft that you're supposed to turn in to me. And also they're used to getting feedback and editing from someone else. At this level, when we're elevating our writing, it's really important to emphasize to students that editing and drafting is an essential part of the writing process. It's not an afterthought. It's not something that you should maybe not do if you don't have time, and that you should be your own first editor. I worked for a long time as a writing tutor at a 2-year college, and so many times I would get students who sat down at the table and expected me to just go through with a red pen and solve all of their problems because they were at the tail end of their, of the time they had to write their paper. So just emphasizing to students to draft, to edit, to engage with your own writing, so that you can become a better writer. So with that in mind, the tools that I'm going to present are not just tools to use during the writing process, they're tools to use during the editing process too. So the first one I'll talk about is promoting active voice. When I was first learning to write, when I was a beginner, passive voice was strictly forbidden. You weren't supposed to use it at all. In APA style, we recognize that although active voice is usually less confusing, it's more clear, it's less wordy, there is a place for passive voice, because in active voice, the person or the subject of the who's doing the action comes first, but in passive voice, the action comes first. So in scientific writing, for example, usually or often passive voice is used because it's more important to emphasize the process of what's being done. Maybe there's an experiment that's being described, and in order for someone who reads it next to understand how to reproduce or replicate that experiment, it's important for the process to be really clear. It's not necessarily important for the person who's doing the experiment to be centered. Next slide, please. So another tool that students can use, again, writing and editing, is to smooth transitions. Chelsea talked about in that in the quest to that at this point, maybe the ideas are down on paper, they're not struggling with that blank page, and the ideas are kind of developed, but there may not be, maybe the flow of the sentences it's not quite there, or it's not transitioning between one idea to the next needs some help. So one way to talk to students about doing this is by using transition words. And sometimes students understand that, yeah, okay, I've read things where they use transition words, but they're not used randomly. In this handout that we have, I think it's helpful because there's a list of transition words, but also how they function and how you can actually use them in your paper, specifically to help you connect ideas, to help students give more clarity, logic, and flow to their work. Next slide, please. And so if the first two rules or tools are kind of dealing with clarity of thought, helping readers to understand our thought process, tool 3 deals with using precision in language, being thoughtful about the words that we use when we're talking about people, especially. In the disciplines that use APA style, a lot of them are social sciences. So we work with people. And so first and foremost, we want to talk about and write about people with dignity and respect. But also we want to be precise because we're working in scientific areas, we're writing in an academic and scientific way. So we want to be precise in our wording, and we don't want to make assumptions or bring in our own personal biases to the work that we do. So a good example here, I won't go through all of them, but we have a brief guide to bias-free and inclusive language. But a good one to talk about is age, because often you'll see something like senior citizens or the elderly when students are talking about someone who's older. That's not really clear. I mean, when I was starting to write, maybe a senior citizen was anyone from 30 up. Like as I get older, maybe that definition changes for me personally. It's important to be precise about who we're talking about. And so especially in scientific writing, you probably want to specify maybe the participant group that you're dealing with, adults age 65 and older, or adults 65 to 85, whatever the case may be. That is being more precise in your writing so that the reader understands who you're actually talking about. And then some of these other examples here, it really emphasizes talking or writing about people with words that they would use to describe themselves, going back to the idea of dignity and respect, and also writing about people in precise ways. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then to go off of that, and to carry on with the precision in language idea, choosing words, helping students to understand that choosing words that fit their scholarly voice will elevate their writing. So sometimes students understand that they need to kind of up their game when it comes to writing academically in a scholarly way. And so they think, okay, I'll take a more simple word and I will just kind of use a thesaurus and kind of sub in a word that seems more fancy. We're calling them $5 words. But really, it's important to understand that, for example, something like utilized and used, utilized has a different connotation than used. They're not necessarily a one-to-one. They're not necessarily perfect synonyms. There's a reason to use utilized or articulated instead of stated or said. And again, being thoughtful about the language that you use, so that it doesn't take away from the reader's understanding, but it makes things more clear. And to go along with that, to go further, looking for places where writing may be too casual or too imprecise. So avoiding contractions, colloquialisms, slang, idioms, that kind of thing, because although those things are not wrong, and when we talk or when we in certain contexts, they're not appropriate, or they're not useful, or they don't add to clarity in academic and scientific writing. We want to be as clear as we can, and we want to consider the reader. So also that has to do with defining abbreviations. In many disciplines, there are discipline-specific abbreviations, but it's still important to define those things early on and to use terms consistently as you write your paper. Next slide, please. So one development that we are all thinking about, and it kind of is hovering over all steps of the writing process, is AI. So we have a few tips with dealing with that with students. Next slide. So ChatGPT, chatbots, AI, these are tools that they're not going anywhere. Students are already using them. And in some cases, these tools are very efficient, they're very effective for doing certain things. But it's also important for students to understand that there are limitations to ChatGPT and any other kind of AI. Sometimes they think of them as, ChatGPT is this all-knowing oracle that can do no wrong, but that's far from the truth. But one way that students can use AI and then efficiently is to help them to gather sources at the beginning of their writing process. So in other words, they have their subject and they use AI to come up with a list of sources that may support their ideas. The limitation of that is that AI can hallucinate sources. And by that, I mean, you type in your subject and this source comes up that seems so perfect for your work, but it's not real. AI has basically come up with a source that is not available for you to actually read. And so it's important to go back to your maybe an academic database and see if that source actually exists in the world before you take it as gospel that it's true, that it's there. So here we emphasize that AI makes mistakes, and so it's important to double check it's the work that it does. Next slide, please. Another way that students often use AI, which can be very efficient, is using it to paraphrase or to summarize articles that may be very complex. Or maybe, you just don't want to spend a lot of time reading a very long article when you're not even sure that it's relevant to your subject. And that can be fine. But here, don't stop at the AI summary. Go back and read the source yourself, even if AI helped you to understand the source. Citation or cite sources written by humans, not answers generated by AI. So again, just recognizing that AI is a tool, but it doesn't take the place of human thought and you understanding what you're reading and what you're writing. And so down here at the bottom of this slide, the APA has some reference formats and some citation guidance about AI. But like all things with AI, things may change, and we're trying to keep our ear to the ground and see how these things will develop and how to use them ethically. Next slide. And finally, in regards to AI, AI isn't always necessarily a very good writer. Sometimes, heaven forbid, that a student would take something completely that AI wrote and then try to use it as or say that it was their own writing. But even though like AI is incorporated into a lot of writing tools like Word, like Grammarly, that's okay. Sometimes it helps with spelling or grammar or things like that, and it's a tool. But AI is not going to help students to develop their scholarly writing voice. It has sometimes I think we've all probably had the experience where we read something written by AI. It has a very particular voice itself that can be very long-winded. It can be very informal. Students need to develop their own scholarly writing voice because copying AI is not necessarily the voice that they're going to want to cultivate. So yeah, that's what I have to say about AI and our third quest. But yes, just in conclusion, sometimes when students make a transition from 2-year colleges, high school, or even 4-year to graduate school, they don't, they feel like they don't have anything, that the jump between being where they are and being a seasoned researcher or writer is too far. But they do have things that they come into those programs with that they can use, and that writing is an evolving skill, and that they have some of the things they need to keep learning. Questions.